Okay, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Zevachim Daf Samech, and yesterday we began a discussion about the size of the Mizbeach that Moshe Rabbeinu had. We know it was smaller than the regular Mizbeach, but we're not exactly sure. Not exactly sure. This is unbelievable. He's like the fourth triplet, you know? Unbelievable. So there's a machlokas. According to Rabbi Yossi, it was an amma by amma. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it was not an amma by amma. It was 6 amos by 6 amos. Okay, so we're going to start analyzing that now at the top, toward the top, I should say, of Daf Samach Amid Aleph, and we're 6 lines down. Bishlam Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who said that Moshe's Mizbeach was 6 amos by 6 amos. And we're not going to do all the math, but he did 1,000 a day on that, and he would have only done 11,000 a day on the larger one. So then, Hainu Dichsiv Kidash. Then I understand why we had to sanctify the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, not just the Mizbeach, because there wasn't enough space to do all the korbanos. I understand that. Elo the Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, who says that Moshe Rabbeinu's actual fire was 1 by 1, and he did 1,000 there. They could have done 400,000 on the large mizbeach in a day because it was 1 by 1 versus 20 square, which is 400 times 1,000. So my kiddush. Well, if that happened, then why was Shlomo Makadesh the floor of the Azara? Says the Gemara. That's not a good question. Maybe lahamid b'mizbeach. Maybe we were makdish the floor of the Azara because we had to put a mizbeach on top of that floor, and therefore the ground underneath had to be mekudash. So maybe that's why. Not a good argument. And then again, Bishlam the Rabbi Yossi. Remember, Rabbi Yossi says it was a 1 by 1 fire. Hainu dichsiv katan. We understand why you're calling it a katan. We get it. Elo the Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it was 6 by 6, and therefore the larger mizbeach was also too small. They were both too small. The 6 by 6 did 1,000. The 20 by 20 did 11,000. But it was definitely not enough. My katan. Why are you calling the smaller one katan? They're all katan, and none of them are big enough. It's a weird language. Says the Gemara, Hachi Kamar, a third of the way down on Samach Amid Aleph. Mizbeach Avanim She'asa Shlomo Tachas Mizbeach HaNachoshes Katan Hava. The replacement of the Mizbeach HaNachoshes was taka too small. And it wasn't really talking about what you thought it was talking about in regards to the square footage of the area, I should say, of the fire. That's not what we were talking about. The Mai Pligi. Why is it that Rav Yossi and Rav Yehuda even argue in the first place? Why are they arguing 1 by 1 and 6 by 6? Why are they arguing this way? Says the Gemara, because it depends how we want to make our drasha. Really, what we need to do is look up a whole host of psukim on the previous page in regards to the in regards to the Gzeir Shava we had yesterday of Ravua. That was one source that we had by our case, and one source that we had by Yechezkel. So it says the Gemara as follows: Mar Savar, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion of Danin Chutz Michutz. We learn about Moshe's Mizbeach that was not in the Kodesh HaKodashim, the one that we were talking about, and we compare it to the pasuk in Yechezkel, which was about a regular, also external Beis HaMikdash. Ve'ein danin chutz mipnim, but it's not appropriate to learn. But it's not appropriate to learn the outside mizbeach from the inside mizbeach. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that we're comparing to the outside, and why he concludes it's 6 by 6. Umar Sava Rabbi Yossi was of the opinion of done in kli mikli. We have to learn from portable things. Moshe's from the Mishkan was portable. And that's why we learn Moshe's from the portable, and the Mizbeach HaPnimi of Moshe was also portable. So therefore, we're going to learn Chutz Mipnim, the Ein done in Kli Binyan, but we can't learn from the regular Mizbeach that's not portable. The regular Mizbeach was cemented to the ground. I don't know how they got it to stick. I don't know what technologies they had. Did they have screws? I don't know what they did. But once the Mizbeach, I guess it was just glued down with the tar and that mixture. Imagine it's pretty sticky. Right. Yeah, it has some kind of cement fixture, something like that. Must be.
What's the overall weight?
I mean, it had to have been tens of thousands of pounds. You're talking, and it's so it's hard to. It's 32 amos. If you multiply by the conservative opinion of an amma, it's 45. It's 50 feet by 50 feet of solid. You could do the cubic feet of cement. I mean, it's got to be just ridiculous. Do you know what that is?
625 million or some pounds, something like
What? How did you do that?
that. I know
That was disgusting. That's exactly the right word.
What PSI strength are you
He said the volume of the cube, I know, 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is
125.
120.
You don't even know how you did the math. It's amazing. It's like the calculators. They're just programmed. I know, yes. It just works.
It's spitting out like it just.
Okay, good. That's what the Gemara says. Anyways, the Machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda was dependent on whether or not we learn chutz michutz or if we learn kli mikli. Says the Gemara, we learned on the previous Amud. Amar Rava, Moder Rabbi Yehuda b'damim, that when it comes to blood that has to be done on the mizbech. The contrasting point yesterday we learned was that the ktores, if the mizbech from the inside of the mizbech of the mizbech hapnimi was missing, we could do the ktores on the floor where the mizbech used to be. That's allowed, but not by blood. How do we know this? Titania, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kos echad haya mamale midam ta'aruvos. On Erev Pesach, when they were shechting all these korbanos Pesach, all the bloods were mixed on the floor. So look at what he did. They were memale kos echad midama tarobes v'shovcho al gav mizbech. One of the kohanim would take a scoop of the blood from the floor. Remember the picture of the blood being like up to there. It just I don't know. I'm not so squeamish, but that's a lot of blood. So what did they do? They took a scoop of that and they put it on the mizbech. Why? Says the Gemara halfway down. She'im yishpoch damo shel achas mehen. Had it been that even one korban pesach had spilled, meaning the blood spilled from the neck without it being collected in a kli, so then nimtza zeh machshiro. This process of taking one scoop, we assume at that point all the blood is one scoop, put it back on the mizbech. Look at this beautiful svara. V'yisal kadaitach savar Rabbi Yehuda kula azara mikdasha. If really Rabbi Yehuda is right and the entire floor was kodesh, ha'is avida la mitzvah say. Why do you have to scoop it up? If the floor is kodesh, no need to pick it up and put it on the mizbech. What are you worried about? Even if you skip the kli sharis, big deal. But it's on a kadosh place. It's basically zrika sadam, right? So says the Gemara, no. The dilma mishum de kasavar shvicha mikoach ha'adam ba'inan. Says, oh, you're right. Maybe the floor is kadosh, but we still need to have the koach of an adam, right? We have these discussions by netilas yadayim. Is it a ma'aseh kof ba'alma? Those kinds of things come up in halacha. So says the Gemara, maybe we needed to have a human being pour it. Says the Gemara brilliantly, good. Pick it up in the cup and dump it back on the floor because the floor is still holy. Why did you have to put it on the mizbech? Imke nishkale v'nashbichle aduchte. Just take a scoop and dump it right back where you found it because the floor is holy. Says the Gemara, still could be true, but vidilma perhaps mishum deboinan mitzvah min amuvchar. Afal pi that according to Yehuda the floor was kadosh because Shlomo was mekadesh the floor, but maybe the only reason why we had to pick up that scoop on Erev Pesach and put it on the Mizbeach was not because it wasn't kosher on the floor, but rather it's mitzvah min amuvchar to do it on the Mizbeach.
When you say you put it on the mizbech, talking about the zrika, or are you talking about the after zrika pouring like on the yesod?
Not shirayim.
Well, you're not doing zrika then. I mean, even though it's on the floor, it's all kaddish, but you're still missing the action of zrika.
That's a good point.
It doesn't matter how it gets there. If you hold it, doesn't matter how it gets there.
It's agreed that zrika needs to be on a specific corner, but it was
Right, well, just suddenly said this would be good enough, so it got where to go at the regular way. But yeah, that's the Lord's answer, mitzvah muvchar is the process
to do it
the
proper
in the
way.
right place.
But this would
But ultimately, it ended up, I mean, that would be the chakira, is it the sprinkling or is it the blood ending up in a makam cut?
Look at Tosfos. I don't understand it, but look at Tosfos with me. Dibra Maskal Mode Rabbi Yehuda B'damim. Tema. My kasal kadaitach meikara. V'ha keren, and it should say v'keves v'ravua yisod me'akven. All of these things are ma'akev. How does this solve any problems?
So it might be cut off, nice.
It's nice, but
Help
you didn't do anything technically correct.
Yeah, I see. Also didn't unlock, like, for
Not-
current Pesach, you didn't unlock it for a chila yet either, right? Because you need to go through.
I'll sprinkle it, but that's. the-
No, that's our driver. That's what's motivating us.
If it's actually ma'akev, what also says. It does seem like it is the place more than the sprinkling, by the way, based on that.
Look at Rashi, Mo de Rabbi Yehuda b'damin. Te'afel gav dam Rabbi Yehuda kol azar mekudeshes hani mili lahaktir chalovim. Aval zrikas damim lo. He's talking about zrikas hadam. It is zrikas hadam.
Is it?
Does it count?
It comes, basically you shafted the animal like a.
You're doing and you're assumingly.
You're dumping a cup of
you're
blood.
doing A Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah is just like,
Once you pick up.
it just goes on the floor.
So that the Gemara, this whole idea was that you pick this up and you splash it on the mizbeach. Does that count as rikas hadam? Because that's what Rav is talking about. He's saying b'damim, it has to be on the mizbeach. I don't know that it matters because I think to the first point you messed up. So, is this how you do shiraim? I guess shiraim you could pour it like that. That's true.
We have both sides of it, what happens if it falls on the ground?
Correct.
It's an akin shiur.
No, but I'm asking the question of can you do zrikas hadam by splashing the kli?
Right, instead of a finger.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I don't remember learning that.
Question, I don't-
I don't remember learning that iteration, but me not remembering something is not a proof. Good
You
question.
can work in the right place with that.
Right. Could be. Could be.
We talked about the birds.
That we spoke about, yeah.
I'm sure it's-
Yeah, there we compared the initial splash as Rika, and then the being the matzah was considered to be the shiraim.
Or
I don't think it does.
for a bigger animal.
No. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Amr Belazar, mizbeach shenifka. Let's say the mizbeach gets broken, so then ein ochlin begino shiure mincha. Let's say that the korban mincha was brought, and then the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Can I eat the shirayim of the mincha? So it says the Gemara, no, you're not allowed to. Shneimar, the pasuk says in Vayikra, ve'ichluha matzos etzel hamizbeach. Okay, etzel hamizbeach achluha. That wasn't the location they ate it in. Ela bisman shu shalim, v'lo bisman shu chaser. So what do we see? The pasuk's talking about matzos. Matzos is not matzah like matzah, but we're talking about the korban mincha. So that has to be eaten only when the Beis Hamikdash when the mizbeach, is in good working order, not if it becomes puzzle. Ashkechan shiur mincha. We learned about shiur mincha that it can only be eaten with the mizbeach being shalim. Kodshe kodshim minalan. How do we know that by kodshe kodshim that it can only be eaten with the mizbeach as a shalim? Talmud Omar kodshe kodshim. We have a gzera shava. What about kodshim kalim? How do we know, says the Gemara, that kodshim kalim can only be eaten if the mizbeach is shalim? Amar Abaye Asya Midrash de Rabbi Yossi. We learn that kodshim kalim are not allowed to be eaten when the mizbeach is not shalim from a drash of Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer Gimel Dvarim Mishum Gimel Zakenim. There were three things that were taught by three wise men. Top of Samech Hamid Beis. V'zeh echad mehen. The following din, we learn this in Makos, is as follows. Top line. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Yachol Yala Adam Meiser Sheni L'Yerushalayim Yochlen Bizman Hazeh. Perhaps even today, post Churban, I'm able to take Meiser Sheni and eat it and fulfill the mitzvah of eating it in Yerushalayim. Vidinhu, and it's logical to assume this. Why? Bechor Taun Havas Makom. We know that an animal that's a Bechor has to be brought to a specific place. Umaiser Taun Havas Makom. Meiser also needs to be brought in another place, in the Beis Hamikdash. Ma bechor einu ela bifnei abayis, af meiser einu ela bifnei abayis. So this argument seems to say that the meiser has to be bifnei abayis. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Ma le bechor shekain taon matan dam ve'emur legabe mizbech. But bechor is different than meiser. When it comes to Bechor, the Bechor needs to have its blood sprinklings and the emurim, the extra parts of the animal, those need to be brought on the Mizbeach. So Meiser is very different. Says the Gemara, no. Bikurim yochichu. Bikurim are a great source to learn from because they're also not on the Mizbeach, yet they're also not brought without the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara, you can't argue that because Mala Bikurim shkein tu'un and hanacha. The halacha by Bikurim is that they require hanacha. They have to be placed physically in a particular place near the Mizbeach. So with all of that, how do we then know the din that we're looking for? Talmud Lomar, the Gemara says, Vayvesim Shama Olo Sechem. We're actually going to look at the whole pasuk over here. The pasuk says in Dvarim Yud Bezvav, Vayvesim Shama Olo Sechem V'zivchechem. You're going to bring your olos and you're going to bring your animals. Ve'es Masro Sechem. And your maisers, ve'es trumas yerchem and trumas, v'nidrechem nidvosechem u'choros, v'karchem etzonchem. And your bechoros, all of your animals, all of your firstborns. So what did we see from this pasuk? That there's a hekesh here. Ma bechor eino ella bifnei habayis, back in the Gemara. Just like a bechor must be in front of the house, af meiser eino ella bifnei habayis. So the Gemara concludes that the reason that we know that meiser is not allowed to be eaten bisman hazeh is because of the pasuk of hevesem. Says the Gemara, why? V'nehadar dina, forget that. Let's just do a kal v'chomer v'nesi b'mehatzad. Remember, we brought bikurim, so why don't we just learn a mehatzad? Remember, we've learned hundreds of mehatzads. Why don't we do that? Says the Gemara, because what we tried to do that from does not work. That when it comes to Bechor, and when it comes to Bikurim, there's a tzad shel mizbeach. That's pasha, not true by Meiser. So therefore, you can't learn from there. The Gemara over here wants to know, why is it that when it comes to Bechor, it's obvious that it can't be done without a mizbeach, but when it comes to Meiser, it's not obvious. So says the Gemara, this goes back to an old sugya that we've learned about many, many, many years ago at this point. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down, we'll be stopping about 10 lines from the bottom. Ika savar kedusha rishona kitchela shaita v'kitchela asilavo. If we hold that the first sanctification of the land was lasting, then afilu bechor nami, then even bechor should be allowed even without a Beis HaMikdash. Who cares? It's kadosh. We don't need the bias, we need the kedusha. So let's just do it. Let's have the kedusha. And if you want to say that the initial sanctity of the land is no longer present, and we would have to rekindle it with the new building of the Beis HaMikdash, that's fine. But then afilu b'chor nami tibai. But then just like we said by Meiser, perhaps Meiser is allowed without a Beis HaMikdash, then we should have asked the same question by Bechor, but we didn't do that. It says the Gemara, Amar Ravina lo olam kasavar lo kitcha. Really, we hold that the kitcha rishona was not kitcha la silavo. The kitcha la shaita was not kitcha la silavo. What is the case that we're dealing with? Let's look at this detailed case. Halfway down on Samach Hamid Beis. Bebechor shenizrak damo. The bechor, the animal, the zrikas hadam was done kodem chorban habayis, an hour before, and then bechor av habayis, the adayin besaro kayam. Okay, shchita, kabbalah, holacha, zrika, all done at 6 a.m. At 6:05 a.m. the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So says the Gemara, the iskash besaro ledamo, and we have a similarity, a hekesh between basar and dam. Ma damo b'mizbeach, af besaro b'mizbeach. Just like blood must be brought by the mizbeach, so too meat can only be eaten when there's a mizbeach. And from there, from the hekesh of dam and basar, v'asi meiser v'yalek mi b'chor, and that we then learn out to another location. But of course, that poses a problem because we just did a double hekesh. You're not allowed to do a double hekesh. Says the Gemara, how can you say that we start talking about the dam and the basar, and then we extend it from the world of Bechor to Meiser? How can you do that? That's v'chi davar halamid behekesh chodzer malamid behekesh. You're not allowed to do that. Says the Gemara, don't worry. You remember the only time we had the rule of you're not allowed to take a hekesh and learn to another one was by kachim. If it's not by kachim, we allow that type of limud. So says the Gemara, Meiser dagan chulinhu. The Meiser dagan, it's just regular food. That's our starting point, right? So says the Gemara, Hani chalamanda amar basar lamed azlinan. that if that which we're learning to is chulin, if you hold that way, then you can learn a hekesh to another hekesh. Elalaman de amar basar melamed azlinan. But according to the one who says that we follow the starting point, which is not a case of meiser, but rather the case we were talking about earlier of bechor, ma'ikol meimar. So says the Gemara, don't worry. Dam and basar is not a separate hekesh. Dam and basar is one. That's not dam to basar is a hekesh. No, dam and basar are the same exact thing. Damu basar chad milsi. So we're learning from damu basar over to the world of meiser. We'll stop right here at Kisalik Ravin, and Amir Hashem will pick up tomorrow with Daf Samach Aleph and with Daf Samach Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.